Hello, my name is Matthew Reitzel. I'm the manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives, and I will be giving this pre-recorded presentation titled Recently Accessioned Manuscript Collections. This is the third year we've been doing this, and this is the 2023 version. The presentation will provide information on the South Dakota State Archives, will briefly define a manuscript collection, and explain our accessioning process at the South Dakota State Archives. And then I'll finish up by showing some examples of our recently processed manuscript collections. This video is scheduled to post on the morning of Thursday, October 19th. Archive staff will be monitoring our social media platforms, so if you have any questions, please feel free to send them along. And thanks again for watching. Again, this presentation is titled Recently Accessioned Manuscript Collections. My name is Matthew Reitzel, manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives. So October is Archives Month in South Dakota and throughout the United States. Archives Month is a time to highlight the importance of archival institutions and to promote the need for collecting, preserving, and making historical records available to the public. Our title this year for Archives Month is From South Dakota to History. We kind of had a post office and mail theme this year, and this is our poster at left. To find out more about Archives Month activities and events, you can go to our website, history.sd.gov/archives. And you can also read the Proclamation of Archives Month by South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. One of the highlights of this year's Archives Month is Flat Doan. Doan Robinson, former state historian and director of the South Dakota State Historical Society, has been mailed out to Historical Society members. We've received a number of images of Flat Doan throughout the state as libraries, museums, historical societies, and historical locations. You can see images of Doan throughout South Dakota on our social media sites. So you can see he's been to the Corn Palace and the Dignity Statue, Wall Drug, and the Alex Johnson Hotel in Rapid City. So he's been getting around the state quite a bit for Archives Month. The South Dakota State Archives is normally located at the Cultural Heritage Center in Pierre. The building is also the headquarters of the South Dakota State Historical Society, which is within the South Dakota Department of Education. There are 5 programs within the State Historical Society, which are the State Archives, Museum, the State Historic Preservation Office, and the South Dakota Historical Society Press. The 5th program, Archaeology, is located in Rapid City. The State Historical Society is also supported by the South Dakota Historical Society Foundation, which provides financial resources to the programs of the society. However, the Cultural Heritage Center is currently closed for construction until 2025. The various programs of the Historical Society are still working to collect, preserve, and interpret the history of our state. For those of you familiar with the State Archives, this is a picture of our research room. At the left and the right is how it is currently looking. You can see why we can't have researchers in the building when there's a bulldozer in our research room. The end goal, as far as the State Archives is concerned, is that by the end of all this, we'll have more room in our library, and there'll also be more storage room for the archives, so we'll be able to collect South Dakota history for years to come. And yes, even Flat Doan was able to get into the Cultural Heritage Center to do some inspecting of our work, and he even found a hard hat, which I thought was very interesting. So, again, my name is Matthew Reitzel. I'm the manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives. October is Archives Month in South Dakota throughout the U.S., and this is the 2023 version of this presentation. So what is a manuscript collection? Manuscript collections tend to be things like photo albums, letters, correspondence diaries, things that individuals create, usually for themselves. Sometimes it's being sent to others, but it's personal professional and family papers are good examples of that. That also includes business and organizational records. We do have organizational records here at the State Archives, and I'll be talking about one in particular later in this presentation. So business and organizational things are sometimes the kind of records people don't think of when they think of manuscript collections. Typically, they're unpublished documents. Anything that's been published, of course, would be considered a library collection. They're also non-government records. Most of the collections we have at the State Archives are government records, but we do have a fair amount of manuscript materials as well. And then they're also non-museum collections. So things like tables and uniforms, those are museum items, not archival items. And then we, as usual, get things in various formats. We've always gotten things in different formats through the years. Mostly we deal with paper and photographs, but we've also had film collections, and now we're moving into digital media and things like that. So there's always different ways that people are creating and sending us history, and we're always here to preserve it, no matter what format it comes in. Manuscript collections also tend to be primary sources, and primary sources are immediate, first-hand accounts of a topic from people who had a direct connection with it. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to accession something. That's a fancy archival word, which means the process of formally and permanently accepting materials into an archive. So when items are donated to us, we kind of go through that process of seeing, is this something we would like to add? Does it have to, does it connect with South Dakota history? And is this something we want to add to our collections? And I kind of like this photo here at the left, because to me it looks like boxes that are all in disarray, and we kind of try to manage the chaos of things that come in for that accessioning. And every collection then also gets its own accession number, which is a unique identifier assigned to a processed collection associated with the repository's databases as a means of cataloging and locating the collection. So within all of that chaos, we have to be able to find things. We do collect things, that's one thing we do, but then researchers and other individuals, when they're coming to find certain things that we have to be able to locate it for them within over 16,000 cubic feet of records. So it's important for us to accession things properly and give everything its own accession number, which you'll see a little later when I talk with the recently donated materials. So in short, our tasks here at the State Archives are to collect, preserve, and make items available. The Historical Society has been collecting items for decades, and this map here is one of those examples of that. We preserve our items, and then we make them available to people. And one of the things we always keep in mind is we keep it available today to people who want to see it, but also that we're preserving, making things available for decades to come down the road. And a couple of the ways we do that, one is through Archive Space. You can go to our website, and there's a link there called Search Our Collections. All of the manuscript items I'll be going with later here in this presentation can be found on Archive Space, and this is just an index to the collections. It doesn't actually show digital images. It just says here are different items that we have. Here are the subjects of materials we have that you can look through. Another thing we have is the South Dakota Digital Archives. Probably the most referenced materials on here are our photo collections. There's over 70,000 photographs online and over 1,100 maps. And that one map I showed previously from 1873 of Dakota Territory is on the South Dakota Digital Archives map collections. A couple of recent additions we've had to the South Dakota Digital Archives are the John and Alice Pickler collection, which covers Women's Christian Temperance Union and some equal suffrage materials. The Pioneer Daughters collection, which was put together by the General Federation of Women's Clubs. Also, we've had some audio collections that are now available on the South Dakota Digital Archives. And then finally, the Jane Breeden collection, and she covered a bunch of different materials from the Temperance Union, suffrage, and also Dickens Club, and other women's club appear materials. Again, my name is Matthew Reitzel. I'm the manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives. This presentation is titled Recently Accessioned Manuscript Collections. Thanks for watching. So the first collection we're going to start with here is the Helmy Healy collection, which was a diary from 1950. If you look at the bottom left of the slide here, you'll notice the H2022-001. That's just a way for us to recognize that the H in front means that it is a manuscript collection. The 2022 is the year that we processed it, the year we received it, and then the 001, of course, means that this was the first collection that we got in. So this collection consists of one diary from 1950 written by Helmy Healy. Helmy was born in Michigan and came to Langford in the 1920s to teach school. She married William Healy in 1923, and they lived on a farm near Langford for many years. The 1950 diary notes experiences in and around the Langford area, as well as the Healy's time spent in Phoenix and other Arizona communities. The Healys were in Arizona from January to early April of 1950. They lived in Langford from April to November and were back in Arizona from late November through the end of the year. The diary covers Helmy's experiences in both locations. The diary is an excellent representation of snowbirds in 1950, and that's where Northerners moved to warmer southern climates at cold times of the year. So I was excited with this that I could add the term snowbird to our collections as far as the subject heading. And this is just one diary. It's just 1 year of a person's life, but it tells us a lot about people in South Dakota, the different things that they would do, how they would go about. And with Helmy, it also explained a lot of her day-to-day activities, which were also important and good for us to see as well. Next, we have one postcard postmarked from July 6th of 1908, showing Main Street of Cottonwood, South Dakota, which is in Jackson County. The correspondence dated July 5th, 1908 notes, quote, a big celebration was going on in Cottonwood, which is presumably over the 4th of July. The postcard shows wooden buildings lining both sides of Main Street. Identified signs include restaurants, a drugstore, a doctor's office, a bank, and a hotel. A stone building still under construction at the back left is visible in the distant background and would later become a bank in Cottonwood, which is still standing today. With this collection, it was just one postcard. It was the only thing we received, but it was a photograph that we didn't have. And so a lot of times, we do get collections that are 30 and 40 boxes of things. Usually they're government collections, but we also get things like this, where it's just one postcard that was sent to us in the mail. Shown here is a photo album featuring a leather cover with the words snapshots and a sketch of Mount Rushmore on the cover. The album contains 30 photographs of a trip through the Black Hills taken by two women in 1940. Locations identified in this photo album include the Badlands, Needles Highway, a stagecoach wagon promoting the Stage Barn Crystal Cavern in Piedmont, and the Horace Ross Monument at Custer. Also included are 5 different types of Black Hills tourist camp buildings, 2 of which you can see here. There was also a picture of the entrance to Wind Cave and shows a number of highway scenes. So these collections are showing, tourism history in South Dakota. And it's also kind of interesting because it's history of non-South Dakotans who are telling us about South Dakota history. There's the picture here at the right with the woman sitting on the back of the car. We were able to scan that license plate, and that's how we knew it was they were from Nebraska, and it dated to the 1940s. So using scan technology to kind of figure out where collections are coming from. This next collection consists of 126 index cards with drawings made by Charlotte Hyde, of photographs from the collections of the South Dakota State Historical Society, specifically photos in the collections of the state archives. Charlotte worked in the Robinson Museum in the 1980s and sketched images of photographs onto index cards as a rudimentary catalog system, presumably for staff use. The cards were numbered and labeled by various categories. Charlotte was an accomplished local artist and author. A vast number of the drawn photographs are now available online at the South Dakota Digital Archives. So this was a very interesting and different collection for us. Usually we don't get drawings of our own photographs, but it was because Charlotte was working in the Robinson Museum. That's where the Historical Society was located before it moved into the Cultural Heritage Center. And it kind of represented a history of ourselves in our way, which we're also always looking for and looking to collect as well. And in a way, too, it was also a way to help preserve the photographs instead of someone thumbing through each photograph trying to figure out an image they wanted to use. They could just look at the index cards instead. So it was a way, too, of making the photos more accessible to individuals in Charlotte's time by using these cards. And then we compare that to with our time today in the South Dakota Digital Archives. So in this slide, you can see a drawing of Charlotte's of the stockholder bank in Fort Pierre. And then in the middle is the photograph kind of cropped to look like Charlotte's image. And then at the far right is an image on the South Dakota Digital Archives. Here's another example of that. This is Frank Wynn's pool hall in Vilas. You can see Charlotte's drawing at left, and at the bottom there is the image of Frank, and then the image is also on the South Dakota Digital Archives. So just the different ways of kind of showing and preserving history through time with past, I guess, workers with the State Historical Society. Again, my name is Matthew Reitzel. I'm the manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives. October is Archives Month in South Dakota throughout the United States. So be sure to check out our website and see all the different things we have online and going on. Here we have a small poem booklet made by Myrtle Green, which consists of 2 poems titled Homesteaders and The Homesteader's Farewell. The Greens' homestead was in Haakon County, roughly 4 miles north of Philip, South Dakota. The poem booklet includes photographs of the Greens and their homestead. They lived on their claim from the spring of 1908 to August of 1909. So first off, it says Stanley County, South Dakota. That's old Stanley County, but they were living in what would be present day Haakon County. This is a good example of homesteaders being out in western South Dakota. What's really interesting about this is that it was written in poetry. This is very different. We don't get a lot of poems of homesteaders. Usually we get letters and correspondence, things like that. So just a different format of how people are recording history in South Dakota. And there were a few photographs, as you can see in here. And I'll read some of it here to you. So again, this is titled Homesteaders by Myrtle Green. We've built us a palace to hold our claim. It's 10 feet 10 by 7. And the rain comes through the cracks in the roof where we scan the leaky heaven. On this place of ours is a castle fine. It's bungled and low to boot. The lizards and mice play hide and seek with the owls too busy to hoot. So again, just some examples of poetry of homesteaders in western South Dakota. The other thing I would have you keep in mind, she mentions the dimensions, the 10 feet 10 by 7. I was giving a talk to an 8th grade history class here a little while back, and I told them to keep in mind the next time they're at a basketball game, they should look at the paint area, which is underneath the basketball hoop there where the free throw line is. That is 12 by 15 feet. So this little homestead shack, which she lists as 10 feet 10 by 7, would fit in that inside that paint area under the basketball hoop. So the next time you're at a basketball game, look at that paint area and think of having to live in a homestead shack that's smaller than that. With the same collection, we have images collected by Rex Green, who was an assistant state engineer for South Dakota from 1910 through 1912. The collection includes photographs of cement work on the first sidewalks and driveways around the state capitol built in 1911. So you see all these people working on the driveway and the materials they're using and the sidewalks as well. And again, this was the first ones around the state capitol. So this collection gives us a little bit of state capitol history. And also it's important to note that collections can tell many different kinds of stories. This one collection all came together. On one hand, you had a homesteader poem, and on the other, it was an engineer who worked on the South Dakota State Capitol. So you never know what you're going to find and how things will kind of come together. And that's important too, that when we're getting this stuff, we're able to say, oh, this collection has poetry, and it also has photographs of the state capitol. Okay, this collection consists of postcards and photographs from Harding County from 1909 to 1910. The postcards were mailed by Amelie Hines Radetsky of Buffalo, South Dakota, to her sister Erna Hines of Woodlake, Minnesota. Amelie and her husband Louis Radetsky homesteaded a few miles north of Buffalo. So what's interesting about this is there's kind of always a roundabout way of how we get collections. So there's two sisters in Minnesota. One of them moves out to Harding County and writes letters to her sister. The family held on to them, and eventually they decided to donate them to us here at the State Archives. So this postcard, you can see the first steam rig on Sheep Creek near Buffalo, and then also the last load from Bowman arrived at the Radetsky shanty. And then outright it has Amelie with some pigs and chickens in front of their homestead. One thing that's, as I deal with photographs, I always remind people to make sure that they're looking in the background whenever they see photos. At the left, there's just a bunch of gentlemen and some kids standing near a platform. I don't know what that is, but in the background, there's the Welcome to Buffalo sign. And then there's also the building, which has the Harding County Era. That was the newspaper at the time in Buffalo County. And then you also noticed Emily there with the horse and buggy, but in the background, they wrote restaurant on the side of the building, and the one on the right, it says store. So again, it's kind of describing some of the materials and things that are going on in the buildings in Buffalo, South Dakota in 1909. A lot of time, as I mentioned, this was correspondence going to the one sister in Minnesota. A lot of our postcard collections tend to just be significant because of the photograph on the front. A lot of times they're blank and back, but this collection was interesting in its own right because it had some of the correspondence from the one sister. And then this could be the photograph of the year, I guess, that I've processed. This was, as it says on the postcard, taken the 4th of July. This is our tennis. So the Radetskys had tennis. They were playing tennis in Harding County in 1909. Shown here is one image within the photo album of Pierre native Charles Hyde, and it features the first pitch made by South Dakota Governor Tom Berry for the Junior League State Baseball Tournament on July 31st of 1936. Several of the baseball images are attributed to Miller's studio in Pierre. The albums include numerous images of baseball being played at Hyde Stadium in Pierre. And most of the images date to the 19-teens to 1930s. So again, we have a governor throwing out a first pitch to a baseball game in Pierre. A lot of times there's an intermix between Pierre history and South Dakota government history, and this is kind of an interesting take on that. Next, we have a yearbook from 1941 titled The Cardinal for Woolsey High School in Woolsey, South Dakota. The self-published yearbook includes write-ups and original photographs. The yearbook originated with Alice Ness Whiff. In 1941, Miss Ness was the English and speech teacher at the school and was the advisor for the yearbook staff. The yearbook includes photos of administration, teaching staff, and classes from kindergartners to seniors. A number of different activities and clubs are also featured in the yearbook. There are several casual images taken of students and staff at the school. So at left you have the the basketball photographs and playing defense and passing the ball, and in the middle one at the very top, according to that caption, it is Superman there at the top of the image. The back of the yearbook includes an advertisement for local businesses, mostly from Woolsey, but also from Huron, South Dakota. So this is a yearbook, so obviously it's going to tell us about the history of a certain school at a certain period of time. What's also interesting about this yearbook, and I also see it in other yearbooks as well, there's this listing basically of businesses in the local area. So again, it's just a collection that tells us more than one thing. Again, my name is Matthew Reitzel. I'm manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives. This presentation is titled Recently Accessioned Manuscript Collections. This presentation is for Archives Month 2023, and thanks for sticking around. We have a few more to show. So this collection consists of 10 photo albums and scrapbooks, mostly comprising of photographs of artwork, events, and members associated with the Woonsocket and area China painters. The materials roughly date from the 1970s to the 2000s. Photographs in the collection include decorative items and other types of artwork. The photographs also include member displays and events, as well as images of members with their artwork. The photo album includes a few images of China painted ornaments on Christmas trees at the South Dakota State Capitol. Individuals identified in the collection include First Lady Mary Dean Janklow and First Lady Jean Rounds. So one of the themes of these last few slides here is recent history. A lot of times people think history is just kind of World War II and backwards, but as we keep going forward in time, things that become history are ever increasing. So again, these are items from the 1970s through the 2000s. Another thing with this collection is it was an accretion to a previously received donation from the Woonsocket area China painters. If you look at the bottom left, it has the two different accession numbers, one from 2021 and one from 1999. The collection we got in 99 was more of their records, like minutes and newsletters and things like that. The one that we got here recently was more their photo albums and stuff. So it's something from the 90s that we received and something from the 2020s that we received, but they're all connected in the same way. This is an also example, like what I said earlier, organizational records, groups of people who get together. Usually they have a defined purpose or reason for doing that, and then they have organization to them. They have bylaws, constitution, minutes, newsletters, and photographs and things like that. So that is the type of material we take here as well at the State Archives. This next collection includes nine color photographs of aerial views of the damage from the Big Sioux River flood of April of 1969. The aerial images were taken from a Cessna 150. The pilot flew east from Vermilion, covering areas of the Big Sioux River in Union County. The scenes include flooding of the Big Sioux River, highways and railroads inundated by water, and flooding of farms and farmland. You can see the flood damage on these images. The one thing you can really note is the photo at left, where the tree line is at, is where the general banks of the Big Sioux River would have normally been located at. So you can see all of the flood damage on both sides of the river. And then there's a photo of a bridge with the water underneath, and then a farm that had surrounded itself with something to try and keep the water out. The other important thing with this collection is these photos were identified. Always be sure to identify your photographs. If someone just handed us these 9 images, it'd be hard for us by looking at this aerial image to know where this came from. But they were identified. We knew they were from April of 1969, and it was the Big Sioux River. So all of that was kind of put in place for us. Next, we have a collection of various tourist brochures and postcards of South Dakota from the year 1987. The items were collected by an out-of-state family traveling through South Dakota that summer. Items include this magazine, which is titled Old West Trail 1987 Vacation Guide. Other topics include a brochure and a postcard of Wall Drug, which you see here. And I think if you go to Wall Drug, you'll still find a very similar map for all of their brochures. There's also a brochure and postcard of the Black Hills Fashion Play. Again, there were a number of other materials in here. These were just the ones I decided to show for the presentation. Again, tourism in South Dakota. Also a list of businesses in 1987. You can see the Reptile Garden ad, and also the Gold Dust for Black Hills Gold Jewelry. At the very top, there's a South Dakota tourism ad for the state. And again, like I said before, it's kind of history of by non-South Dakotans of things going on in South Dakota at certain time periods. Lastly, this collection includes several postcards of various towns and locations throughout South Dakota, and several of the postcards date from the 2000s. So we're not going too far back here in time, but it's still the kind of history and items that we're collecting. So at left, there's a postcard of Rapid City, and at right, one of Sioux Falls. And then here, there's a postcard for the Mammoth site, and one image of Chamberlain and one of Deadwood. And again, it's a way of determining how people are kind of trying to advertise themselves. With Chamberlain, it's the picture of the bridge over the Missouri River, and with Deadwood, it's showing Main Street. And again, we always have to have a picture of the Corn Palace when we're doing presentations. This is one from 2000. And then at the right, there's a picture of the Cultural Heritage Center, which kind of brings us full circle sort of for this presentation. Although I'm not in the Cultural Heritage Center right now, they're doing work so that we can continue to collect, preserve, and make accessible South Dakota's history for time to come. So again, my name is Matthew Reitzel. I'm the manuscript and photo archivist with the South Dakota State Archives, and this concludes the presentation, recently accessioned manuscript collections at the South Dakota State Archives. It's Archives Month 2023. Be sure to go to our website and see all the different materials we have there. And thank you very much for watching.